They say silence is golden. That is a lie people tell you when they have never known true quiet. Real silence, the kind that settles into the walls of a house after 40 years of noise, is heavy. It has weight. It presses down on your chest at 3 in the morning when the heater kicks on and you mistake the sound for footsteps that aren't there. My name is Alara, and for the first month of my 80th year, silence was my only companion. I remember the morning perfectly. It was a Tuesday in November. The sky was that bruised shade of purple you only see just before winter truly sets in. I woke up at 5:30 a.m., just as I had every morning since 1974. Habit is a ghost that haunts you, even when the reason for it is gone. I reached for my husband's side of the bed, my hand brushing against cold sheets that hadn't held warmth in 5 years. "Happy birthday, Alara," I whispered to the empty room. My voice cracked. It sounded foreign, like a rusty hinge that hadn't been oiled. I walked to the kitchen. My house is too big for one person. It's a 4-bedroom colonial that we bought when David was 6 and Sarah was just a baby in my arms. Back then, the house felt small. It was bursting at the seams with life. There were tricycles in the hallway that you'd trip over in the dark. There were teenage arguments slamming doors upstairs. There was the constant low hum of the television, the radio, the washing machine. Now I could hear the refrigerator hum from 2 rooms away. I made coffee. I set a single plate at the kitchen table. I sat down and looked at the phone mounted on the wall. It was an old rotary phone I kept for emergencies, though I had a cell phone somewhere in my purse. I stared at it. I willed it to ring. It's early, I told myself. David is getting the kids ready for school. Sarah is probably in a meeting. Mark is probably sleeping. I ate my toast. I washed my single plate. I dried it. I put it away. 8 a.m. passed. 9 a.m. passed. Noon came and went. At 1 p.m., the mail carrier arrived. I rushed to the door, my heart fluttering like a trapped bird. Maybe there was a card, a surprise package. I opened the mailbox. A bill for the electricity, a flyer for a gutter cleaning service, a catalog for orthopedic shoes. Nothing. I stood on my porch clutching the electric bill, feeling the cold wind bite through my sweater. I looked down the street. It was empty. The world was spinning on, busy and important, and I was standing still. I went back inside and sat in the living room chair, the one that faces the window. I sat there until the sun went down. I sat there until the purple sky turned black. At 8:15 p.m., the phone finally rang. I lunged for it. I nearly knocked over my water glass. "Hello?" I said, breathless. "Hey, Mom." It was David. "David!" I sat up straighter, smoothing my skirt as if he could see me. "Oh, David, I'm so glad you called. I was just—" "Yeah, look, Mom, I can't talk long," he interrupted. The background noise on his end was loud. A TV blaring, kids shouting, life. "I just wanted to say happy birthday before it got too late. Did you have a good day?" Did I have a good day? I had spent 12 hours staring at a phone. I had eaten toast for dinner. I had cried twice over a gutter cleaning flyer. "It was quiet," I said. "I missed you all." I know. We meant to come by this weekend, but Tyler has soccer and Jenna has that dance thing. And honestly, Sarah said she's swamped at work, so we figured we'd just do a big thing at Christmas. That's okay, right? Christmas was 6 weeks away. Christmas, I repeated. The word tasted like ash. "Yes, of course. You're busy." "Great. Thanks for understanding, Mom. You're the best. Love you." Click. He was gone. The silence rushed back in, louder than before. It wasn't just quiet anymore. It was hostile. I sat there, holding the dead receiver, and I realized something that terrified me. I wasn't just alone. I was irrelevant. I was a footnote in the lives of the people who were the entire headline of mine. I went to bed at 9 p.m. on my 80th birthday. I didn't cry. I was too hollow to cry. I lay in the dark and listened to the house settling, the wood groaning under the weight of years. And I prayed. Not for happiness, not for health. God, I prayed, please don't let me wake up tomorrow. I don't want to do this again. But God, as it turns out, had other plans.
Chapter 2. The Architecture of Sacrifice. To understand why that silence hurt so much, you have to understand what I gave up to buy it. I wasn't always a ghost in my own home. Once, I was Alara the artist. In 1965, I was 22. I had paint under my fingernails and a scholarship to an art institute in Paris. I had dreams that were vibrant and messy. I wanted to paint the Seine at sunset. I wanted to live in a garret and drink cheap wine and create things that mattered. Then I met Robert, and then came David. I remember the day I received my acceptance letter to the institute. I also remember 2 days later staring at the positive pregnancy test. Robert didn't ask me to give it up. He didn't have to. The world told me what my duty was. You are a mother now, the world whispered. Your dreams are selfish. Your life is no longer your own. So I put away the brushes. I packed the easel into the attic. I traded the Seine for the suburbs. I poured my creativity into them. I didn't paint canvases, I painted childhoods. When David struggled with reading in the 2nd grade, I spent every evening for a year making flashcards with little drawings on them, dragons and knights to help him remember his vowels. He learned to read. I forgot how to draw landscapes. When Sarah was bullied in middle school for her crooked teeth, I took a job cleaning houses, scrubbing other people's toilets to pay for her braces. I came home with raw red hands, smelling of bleach, and I cooked dinner with a smile so she wouldn't feel guilty. She got her perfect smile, I got arthritis. And Mark, my wild, unpredictable Mark. When he got into trouble with the law at 19, a stupid mistake, a stolen car, a joyride gone wrong, I mortgaged this house. I drained my retirement savings to get him a lawyer. I stood before the judge and pleaded for his character. He's a good boy, I told the judge, my voice trembling. He just needs a chance. He got his chance. I lost my security. I did these things not because I was a martyr, but because I thought it was an investment. I thought love was a currency. I thought if I deposited enough of myself into them, eventually, when I was old and empty, they would pay dividends. I thought they would fill me back up. That night, after the phone call from David, I walked into the hallway. I looked at the family photos lining the wall. There was David at graduation, looking past the camera, eager to leave. There was Sarah at her wedding, her back turned to me as she laughed with her new husband. There was Mark, his eyes red, looking sullen at a Thanksgiving dinner 3 years ago. I looked for myself in the pictures. I was always there, but I was always in the background, or I was the one holding the camera. I was the blur at the edge of the frame, the utility player. Essential, but invisible. I went up to the attic that night. I hadn't been up there in decades. It smelled of cedar and old dust. I pulled the string for the lone light bulb. There, in the corner, covered in a sheet that had turned gray with grime, was my old easel. I walked over to it. My hands were shaking. I pulled the sheet off. Underneath was a blank canvas. It was yellowed with age, brittle. Next to it was a box of dried-up paints, tubes of cerulean blue, alizarin crimson, burnt sienna. They were rock hard, useless, just like me. I sat on the dusty floor of the attic and wept, not for the birthday I missed, but for the girl I left in 1965, the girl who wanted to see Paris. I had killed her to give life to 3 people who couldn't spare 5 minutes for a phone call. I realized then that the sacrifice hadn't been a trade, it had been a theft, and I was the one who left the door unlocked. Chapter 3. The Descent. The weeks after my birthday were a slow descent into gray. The golden pattern of my life became a routine of waiting. I woke up, I waited for the mail, I waited for the phone, I waited for sleep. I stopped going to the grocery store. It was too painful. I would see mothers with their adult daughters laughing over which pasta sauce to buy. I would see grandmothers pushing strollers, looking exhausted but needed. I ordered my groceries online. The delivery driver would leave the bags on the porch. I would wait until his truck drove away before I opened the door, like a hermit crab scuttling out of its shell. I stopped cleaning the house. Why bother? I thought. Who is coming? Dust bunnies gathered in the corners like tumbleweeds. The windows grew grimy. The garden, my pride and joy for 30 years, began to die. The hydrangeas withered, weeds choked the roses. I was mirroring my house. I stopped brushing my hair. I wore the same gray cardigan 4 days in a row. I looked in the mirror and saw a witch, a sad, lonely old witch who lived in a dying house. Christmas came. David called 2 days before. "Mom, bad news," he said. "The kids have the flu. It's a mess over here. Puke everywhere. We can't expose you to this. At your age, it's dangerous." "I understand," I said. My voice was flat. "We'll FaceTime you on Christmas morning," he promised. They didn't. Sarah sent a package. It arrived on December 27th. I opened it. It was a heated blanket. It was a practical gift, a gift for an old person with cold bones. There was no note, just a gift receipt. In case she dies before she can use it, a cruel voice in my head whispered, she can return it. Mark didn't call at all. New Year's Eve arrived. The world was celebrating. I could hear fireworks in the distance. I was sitting in my kitchen, eating a bowl of oatmeal. I looked at the heated blanket, still in its box on the counter. I felt a sudden, sharp pain in my chest. I gasped, dropping my spoon. It clattered loudly on the floor. This is it, I thought. A heart attack. I'm going to die here, alone in my kitchen, and they won't find me for weeks. They won't find me until the neighbors complain about the smell. I waited for the darkness to take me. But the pain passed. It wasn't a heart attack. It was panic. Pure, unadulterated panic at the sheer emptiness of my future. I stood up. My legs were shaking. I walked to the sink and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at the reflection. Deep lines, eyes dull and watery, mouth turned down in a permanent frown. "Is this it?" I asked the woman in the mirror. "Is this how it ends? You just fade away until you're transparent?" Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the sound of a dry twig breaking under a heavy boot. "No," I whispered. I said it louder. "No." I grabbed the box with the heated blanket. I walked to the back door and opened it. The winter air was freezing. I threw the box into the recycling bin. "I am not cold," I said to the night. "I am not dead." I went back inside. I walked to the calendar on the wall, the calendar that was filled with blank squares. I ripped it off the wall. I tore it in half, then in quarters. I threw the pieces in the trash. I wasn't going to wait for dates anymore. I wasn't going to wait for permission to live. Chapter 4: The Revolt of the Sage Green Paint. The next morning, January 1st, I woke up with a strange energy. It was a cold, hard anger. Anger is a tricky emotion. In young people, it is fire. It burns everything down. But in old people, anger can be fuel. It can be the coal that drives the engine when the wood has run out. I walked into the guest room. This was the grandchildren's room. It had bunk beds, it had a toy chest filled with pristine toys, it had curtains with little cartoon bears on them. My grandchildren had slept here exactly 3 times in 10 years. I looked at the cartoon bears. They seemed to be mocking me. "You're a fool, Alara," the bears seemed to say. "You built a shrine to people who don't care." I went to the garage. I found a can of paint I had bought years ago for a project I never started. It was sage green. My husband, Robert, had hated green. He used to say, "It looks like vomit. Let's stick to beige. Beige is good for resale value." Beige. My whole life had been beige, safe, neutral, pleasing to others. I pried the lid off the can. The paint was separated, oily on top. I stirred it with an old ruler until it was thick and creamy. I didn't bother to put down a drop cloth. I dipped the roller in and slapped it onto the wall. The green covered the beige. It was vibrant. It was alive. It was the color of a forest floor. I painted for 6 hours. My shoulder ached, my back screamed, but I didn't stop. I sweated. I got paint in my hair. I got paint on the pristine carpet. Good, I thought. Let the carpet be ruined. It's my carpet. By evening, the room was transformed. It was no longer a nursery for ghosts. It was a cave, a sanctuary. I dragged the bunk beds apart. I called a charity the next day to come and take them away. "Are you sure?" the man asked as he hauled the mattresses out. "These are barely used." "I'm sure," I said. "Take the toys too." When the room was empty, save for the green walls, I brought in my favorite armchair from the living room. I brought in a small table. I brought in a lamp with a warm yellow bulb. And then I went to the attic. I brought down the books, boxes and boxes of them. Art history books, biographies of painters, novels I had bought in the 70s and never had time to read because I was driving kids to soccer practice. I stacked them against the wall, towers of books. I sat in the chair. I opened a book about Monet. I read. For the first time in 40 years, the silence in the house didn't feel heavy. It felt spacious. The silence wasn't an absence of noise. It was an absence of interruption. I read for 3 hours. No one asked me where their socks were. No one asked what was for dinner. No one asked me to sign a permission slip. I looked up from the book. The sun was setting, casting long shadows on my green walls. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't pain. It wasn't anxiety. It was peace. I went to the kitchen. I didn't make a roast. I didn't make a balanced meal. I made popcorn, and I poured myself a glass of sherry. I ate popcorn and drank sherry for dinner, sitting in my green room reading about water lilies. Chapter 5. The Renaissance of Alara. Once the dam broke, the water rushed in. The guest room was just the beginning. The revolution of self spread through the house like a benign virus. I tackled the dining room next. The formal dining room with the long mahogany table that seated 12. The table where I had sat alone on my birthday. I sold it. I sold the table. I sold the 12 chairs. I sold the china cabinet. I bought a small round table for 2. Just 2. One for me and one for a friend, if I ever made one, or for a book. I turned the rest of the dining room into a studio. I went to the art supply store in town. I walked in, feeling out of place. The customers were all young students with piercings and dyed hair. I stood in the aisle with the acrylics, looking lost. A young girl with blue hair approached me. "Can I help you find something?" she asked kindly. I used to paint," I stammered. "Oils, but the smell, it bothers me now." "Try acrylics," she said. "They dry fast. They're forgiving." She helped me pick out brushes, canvases, paints. She didn't treat me like a fragile old lady. She treated me like an artist. I went home and set up my easel in the empty dining room where the light was best. I squeezed out the paint. Blue, white, a touch of crimson. I didn't try to paint the Seine. I painted my garden. I painted the dead hydrangeas, but in my painting, I made them bloom. I made them purple and electric blue. I painted every day. I woke up at 6 a.m., not out of habit, but out of excitement.
I would drink my coffee, looking at my painting from the day before, planning my next stroke. I started leaving the house. I joined a local book club at the library. I was terrified the first time. They won't want me, I thought. I'm too old. But the group was a mix. There was a retired teacher named Joyce, a young mother named Lena who needed a break from her toddlers, a mechanic named Sam who loved poetry. We talked about books. We argued about characters. Joyce and I hit it off. She was a widow, too. Her children lived in London and rarely visited. I used to cry about it, Joyce told me over coffee one day, but then I realized I did my job. I raised them to be independent. If they don't need me, that means I succeeded. It hurts, but it's a success. That perspective shifted something in me. I succeeded. My children didn't need me. They were busy living the lives I had sacrificed to give them. I wasn't abandoned. I was retired. And retirement is for leisure. I started walking with Joyce in the mornings. We walked in the park. We watched the birds. We laughed. I hadn't laughed, really laughed, from the belly in years. 3 months passed. My phone rang occasionally. David or Sarah checking in. "How are you, Mom?" they'd ask, rushing through the pleasantries. "I'm wonderful," I'd say, and I meant it. I didn't tell them about the painting. I didn't tell them about Joyce. I didn't tell them about the sage green room. Why? Because it was mine. I realized I didn't want to share this part of my life with them yet. They hadn't earned it. Chapter 6. The Test. It was April when the test came, the true test of my new life. It was a Friday afternoon. I was in my studio, the old dining room, covered in paint. I was working on a large canvas, a chaotic, abstract piece representing the storm of silence I had survived. The doorbell rang. I frowned. I wasn't expecting anyone. I wiped my hands on a rag and went to the door. I opened it. There stood David and his wife Brenda and their 2 kids, Tyler and Jenna. They had luggage. "Surprise!" David shouted, grinning. The kids pushed past me, running into the hallway. "Grandma, where's the Wi-Fi password?" Tyler yelled. David hugged me. He smelled of stress and highway driving. "We decided to come for the weekend, last-minute trip. We thought, hey, Mom is always home, she'd love to see us." He looked over my shoulder. He saw the empty dining room, he saw the easel, he saw the paint on my apron. His smile faltered. "Mom, what happened to the dining table?" "I sold it," I said, calmly. "You sold it? That was Dad's favorite table." "It was too big," I said. "Come in." They walked into the living room. It was messy. Not dirty, but messy. There were books piled on the coffee table. There were sketches pinned to the curtains. It looked like a home, not a museum. "Mom, the place looks different," Brenda said, picking up a book. "Since when do you read existential philosophy?" "Since I had the time," I said. David turned to me. "Well, anyway, we're here. We figured we'd stay for the weekend. The kids can take the guest room and—" He stopped. He walked to the door of the guest room. He opened it. He saw the sage green walls, the single armchair, the lack of bunk beds. "Where are the beds?" David asked, his voice rising. "Where are the kids supposed to sleep? You always have the guest room ready." The old Alara, the beige Alara, would have crumbled. She would have apologized profusely. She would have slept on the floor so her son could have the bed. She would have run to the store to buy air mattresses. She would have cooked a 4-course meal to make up for her failure. I looked at my son. I saw a man who was 45 years old but still acted like he was 12. A man who assumed I was a permanent fixture, a hotel that never closed. I took a deep breath. I felt the sage green strength in my veins. "There is a lovely Best Western about 3 miles down the road," I said. The silence in the room was absolute. Brenda gasped. David's jaw dropped. "What?" "I don't have the beds anymore, David, and I have plans this weekend." "Plans?" David laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. "What plans? You sit here all day." "Actually," I said, my voice steady,
Tomorrow, I have my art class in the morning, and in the afternoon, I am going to a gallery opening with a friend. You are welcome to stay for dinner tonight. I can order pizza, but you cannot stay here. This house isn't set up for a family of 4 anymore. It is set up for me." David looked at me, really looked at me. He saw the paint on my hands, he saw the spark in my eyes, he saw the straightness of my spine. He didn't see his servant, he saw his mother, a person. "You're serious," he whispered. "I am," I said. I held his gaze. I didn't flinch. Then, slowly, the anger drained out of his face. It was replaced by something else. Confusion? Maybe a little bit of shame. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay, Mom, we'll get a hotel." Chapter 7. The New Golden Age. They stayed at the hotel. They came over for dinner that night. We ordered pizza. We sat in the living room, Brenda and David on the sofa, the kids on the floor, me in my chair. It was the best visit we had had in years. Because I wasn't running around the kitchen sweating over a stove, I actually talked to them. I showed Tyler my sketches. He thought they were cool. He asked if I could teach him how to shade. I talked to Brenda about her job. She seemed relieved not to have to praise a dry roast. When they left on Sunday, David hugged me at the door. "I like the green room, Mom," he said, awkwardly. "Thank you, David." I closed the door. The silence returned, but it wasn't empty. I walked into my studio. The afternoon sun was hitting my abstract painting. The chaotic colors looked beautiful in the light. I am 80 years old. My children left me alone, and in doing so, they gave me the greatest gift of all. They gave me back to myself. They say silence is the loudest sound in the world. They are right. But if you listen closely, if you stop being afraid of it, you realize that the silence isn't screaming, it's singing.